Hey, welcome to the Let's Talk About a show. I'm your host, Ricky Lopez, and we hope you enjoy our guest today. God bless you.
All right, so we're going to jump into the next question. I'm really enjoying this conversation about culture. There's some hard things to think about and to talk about, but necessary. And so let's jump into this next question is, are there biblical examples of believers having difficulties of following God because of cultural norms or practices? So I'll say that again. Are there biblical examples of believers having difficulties of following God because of cultural norms or practices?
Wow. Yeah. And it's, I'm going to give you an example of a big one.
Okay.
The Apostle Peter. Okay. The Lord is just about to use him to bring the gospel into a different culture, to a man who did not know God, but the Lord had been stirring in his heart. He was a good man. He respected and honored the God of the Jews, but he didn't know him. And the man's name was Cornelius. Now, God had to prepare Peter's heart to do this thing, because this was going way outside of cultural norms, way outside. First, the thought that God would open up the door and save Gentile people was just groundbreaking. And Peter, being a good Jew, a good Jewish person, God was going to ask him to do something that he was not prepared to do.
Okay.
So in order to get Peter to a certain point, the Lord gives him this vision. And down comes these clouds, and on the clouds were these different animals that were, biblically speaking, unclean animals. That a Jew, a practicing Jew, would not touch these things, would have nothing to do with them.
Yeah, yeah.
And then God gives him this thing, the big test: kill and eat. And he's like, God, I can't do this. I can't touch. These are unclean animals.
Yeah. That was a big thing.
That's
right?
major.
So,
I mean, the dietary laws for the Jews is one of the things that set them apart from the rest of the world.
Yeah, yeah.
And Peter just coming to the Lord, following Jesus Christ for 3 years, and all these things that are going on, and now him being one of the main, big, strong pillars of the early church going forward and bringing the gospel out. And now a big thing, we're going to go past the Jewish culture and go out into the Gentile culture. Yeah. And he wasn't prepared to do that. God had to hit repeat on that, Groundhog Day style, start this thing over again. Yeah. Here comes a vision again, kill and eat. God, I can't do this. And then God finally tells him, do not call common or just everyday or no value what I've cleansed, as a major step for him to be able to accept God's doing something different that I'm not used to and that I'm not comfortable with.
Yeah.
But what do? He's telling me to do this. Maybe I need to trust him with this.
Yeah.
Now, again, God wasn't doing anything like brand new, but society and culture had kind of put God in a box. Because all along, if you read the Old Testament, the Jews were supposed to be the light to the Gentile world, to lead the Gentile world to God. They kind of circled the wagons and thought it was all about them.
Yeah.
And there was a very common, you could say, thought in the culture of that day, is that the Gentile world, the Gentile heathen world, was just there to stoke the fires of hell, to keep the fires hot.
Yeah.
And so they were just persona non grata. You don't deal with them. You don't touch them. You don't walk on the same side of the street with them. And you do not go into a Gentile's house, period. That was the thing Peter was going to have to, God was going to have to deal with it.
So let me interrupt kindly, because it sounds like the Jews had a legalistic perspective on cultural laws and customs and traditions.
Right.
And they're very legalistic about this stuff. And God was integrating a biblical truth of grace and change and transformation and integration. Mm-hmm. And that was very hard for anybody to swallow. It was hard for the Jews to swallow, especially because, they thought that, my custom's the right custom. We are the chosen. We are the elect, nobody touches us unless God lets them. And, they had this pride in being the chosen nation, to carry out, the things of God. But now God is stepping in and saying, we're going to integrate some things. And that means involving people and others, and how you handle this.
Right. And that's it. And again, this wasn't like God had changed his mind. This was God's heart all along. And I'll go back again. I'm going to go back to Abraham.
Yeah.
Abraham is going through his journey, and he comes up to this kingdom, and he recognizes one thing. His wife must have been astounding for her day and even her age. And he realized at the beginning, in this culture where I'm going into, it's a normal deal for that culture for the king just to start selecting people to be part of his harem, part of his wives, and bring them into his house. And he said, man, if he gets one look at you, he's going to want to do two things: take you for himself and kill me.
That's right.
So tell him you're my sister. Oh my goodness. And so he goes through with this, and Sarah kind of goes along with it for him. And again, here's the deal. Technically, if you look through the lineage and how everything works, technically you could say
he didn't lie
completely.
Yeah.
But he wasn't being truthful.
Yeah.
But my main point in this is, what did God do? God visits this heathen king. And tells him, if you touch her, I'm going to kill you. So how did that play out as far as Abraham's concerned? Now there's a clash of cultures here.
Yeah, that's right.
When he comes to confront Abraham and tell him, what, did I do something against you? Why did you not tell me what's going on here? Because your God visited me and told me he was going to kill me if I touched your wife. Yeah. God was reaching out to this man to let him know, I'm bigger than you. I'm bigger than anything you even know about.
That's right.
And I want you to know something. This is my servant, and I'm going to intervene. I'm a God who sees, and I'm a God who acts on their behalf. Yeah. And this king stepped back and more or less submitted to Abraham's God, who Abraham's still getting to know this God himself anyway, because when he was called out of Ur of the Chaldees, he didn't know this. He was worshiped all kinds of gods.
Sure.
But the one true living God says, I'm different than all of this. And now I'm going to take you on a journey. He didn't tell him where he's going to go. You're going to have to, and this culture is going to be a developing culture.
This is the trust part.
And now he had a clash with a different culture, but he knew the norms of his day, and he knew what would happen. So he tried to, be a little clever about it and try to get ahead of it. And then God shows up and blows the whole thing up. Yeah. He says, I see everything. I saw everything. And I'm going to call you out on it, Abraham. But I'm dealing with this guy. I'm dealing with this king you don't know anything about, but I know him. And so I want him to know who I am.
Yeah, this isn't new then. This isn't, dealing with culture from the lens of God's perspective isn't new.
No, not at all.
We think it's new. We think racism's new. We think how we think all this stuff's new, but it's not. And we go back to the gospel, and we see that God's trying to tackle the human nature. Because, it's the man's nature. We need to be born again to get rid of this old nature. And so God is always, hey, you got to be born again. Let's, we got to change this. But you can't change just through modification behavior. You have to have a new nature. And so these guys, these are biblical heroes. These guys are dealing with pressure from the culture. And we see how they deal with it, and we see like, hey, there's nothing new under the sun. We got to deal with this stuff too.
And you know what? They weren't perfect. They didn't hit it every time.
Yeah.
I'll go back to Peter with this whole deal with dealing with Gentiles. It was a big thing because he later on, as the Lord takes him to this place, takes him inside this Gentile's house. This is just unheard of.
Right.
And the Lord opens up the gospel to this man, and his whole family gets saved. The whole thing is awesome. You think, man, this is all great. Now God's doing all this thing. Peter was still struggling with some things.
Yeah.
Back at home, back where he's from, there's certain expectations from the culture there.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's just like in your own culture, in your own family, in your own extended family and all that. When you come to the Lord, many times it's going to upset some apple carts. I know it did with me and with my wife.
Yeah.
And so as he's dealing with the norms, even normal, the Jews that had come to Jesus Christ and they're walking with the Lord, they had their own little culture inside of them. This is accepted. But what about the Gentiles? Boy, that was still a whole new thing.
Yeah.
But Peter, through this experience with Cornelius and the Lord, he was open to talking to them, and he was being one person when he was with the Gentiles. But when he was back with his own countrymen, he was a different guy.
Yeah.
And Paul, the Apostle Paul, just called him out on it in front of people. Because he said, look, you can't be this way and like shut off the Gentiles when you're with your Jewish friends, and then but when you're with them, you're all okay. And you got to be, what is the Lord doing with you? That's why our identity, we're not going to change and just forget all of our whole culture, because then that's closing off a whole world or doors to be able to talk to people.
Integrate, yeah.
And so you want to integrate that. That's true. But we need to let the Lord be the Lord over our culture.
That's right.
And open doors and have our identity in Him, not just what we perceive our culture to be up to a certain point. It's like, okay, who is the Lord? Because is the Lord bigger than our culture, or are things that make us uncomfortable or make us feel comfortable? Because the Lord will open up doors that you may never even have a thought about. But you got to let Him be God, the Lord. And don't go in there with a judgmental spirit or judging people. Like, hey, I need to tell you some things because I'm God's man. Because God can use a rock to speak the gospel if He wants to. So
so that's good. So I'm going to close on this topic, and maybe you're a father and you're a believer, or a mother and you're a believer, but you come from a different culture and then what your spouse comes from, and you guys are having trouble raising your kids from two ideologies or two different cultures. And, you know, maybe you guys struggle with that, and you're like, I don't want my kid to be confused. It's like, do I teach my kid Santa Claus? Do I teach him the Easter Bunny? Do I teach him the Catholicism way, the Jewish way? What do I do? And my encouragement to you is don't enter that conversation or walk in that conversation through the lens of culture. Walk through that conversation through the lens of the gospel. What would Jesus do? What would the great example do? And He's always going to have the great definition for you. You do it His way. And be careful in how you walk in a cultural perspective. God bless you.